Body blemishes. Okay, now we're going to consider the various metameres and how they affect the various organs when they tense up and as a consequence alter the functioning of the same organs. Now, for the lung metamere, we have the blemish so-called seborrheic acne. For the heart, we have capillary veins, in particular in the legs. For an alteration of the liver, we will find the problem or blemish of the panniculitis. For the gallbladder, we have cellulitis. For the spleen and pancreas, well, they're responsible for horizontal stretch marks. For the stomach, we have vertical stretch marks. And for the kidneys, and an alteration in the kidneys may cause infiltration. An alteration of the large intestine may cause lymphatic acne. An alteration of the small intestine may cause deep veins. And an alteration of the bladder will cause atonia. Okay, let's start with the first blemish, which is seborrheic acne, and is the result of an alteration in the lungs. As you can see here, now that you know how to identify the three zones, that is the oxygenation, assimilation, and elimination zones, you will also be able to know when there is a blemish, where this has originated from. Can you see that 80% of the problem is localized in the top part of the body? Well, then should you ever come across a case like this, you will need to work on the entire oxygenation zone with the palpebral technique, in particular on the lung metamere. But given that in acne on the body, you may have either seborrheic or lymphatic acne, and it's not easy to distinguish between the two, you will then, to be sure, you will work on both metameres. Be careful though, should you ever come across a similar case, you need to know that when you start working on and treating a person with these problems, so there are toxins that are coming out in the form of sebum, or they even have a lymphatic component. At the beginning of the treatment, you will be removing toxins which are already present underneath the skin, and that's why it's already spontaneously coming out. But especially by working on the lung metamere and on the large intestine metamere, these will start to work more efficiently. But as soon as you start stimulating them, and this will easily occur in 80% of the cases, you will remove these toxins even faster, and that's why immediately after the treatment the situation is going to deteriorate. So prepare the customer and explain to him so that when he will see a worsening of the situation, well, you'll tell him, look, I have stimulated these metameres, and as a result, these toxins will be coming out more quickly. So if you prepare the customer won't be afraid, won't be scared away, because after all, he's coming to you to feel better. And so it's a simple concept to understand. Now, the lung metamere, the large intestine metamere, and the entire oxygenation area will need to be worked, as well as the corresponding dermalgia, the lung and large intestine, and the entire reflex zone in the feet, both for the lung and the large intestine. The results that you will get are phenomenal. I'm not exaggerating. You know why? Because the more the body is manifesting a disorder or problem, such as pimples, for example, or acne, and the more there is an alteration in the body. Given that the metameric massage gives or restores a balance to the various organs, because it works on their nerve supply, Well, automatically these organs, by working more efficiently, will no longer have the need to produce toxins, which were the result or the product of a discomfort or of a disorder, whether emotional, and that's why the metamere was tense, and that's the reason why it altered the organ, which starts to produce more toxins, which go into the blood and are released on the skin as an alarm signal. As I was telling you in the previous video, in the example of the dashboard of your car, when a light lights up, that's just to tell you that something's wrong. So even here in this case, it doesn't make sense to treat the pimple and that's it. You need to go to the root cause. So even if you do laser therapy, okay, fine, it's going to improve the situation temporarily, but after a while the problem will reoccur because you're not taking into consideration the root cause. I'm sure this is quite simple to understand. Now, let's go on to the other images. I took some of these today in my studio from some of my customers, but I just wanted to express the basic concept, because if you do this as a profession, you will certainly, sooner or later, come across one of these cases. Okay, now we're going to look at capillary veins. Now these veins appear in the legs mostly, but you can also find them in other parts of the body, on the back and the face and the nose, but they're most common in women, and then I will explain to you why, and especially in the legs. Now, every time you come across this type of blemish, you will need to work the heart metamere and the corresponding dermalgia, so the famous 3 spots. Although this is not going to solve the problem, but because the heart is manifesting a disorder with these capillary veins, even if the person is genetically predisposed to capillary veins, okay, that's fine, but still, you need to interpret this blemish as a warning signal that the heart needs to be stimulated in the nerve supply. And that doesn't mean that the heart is not functioning, but it simply means that that person has gone through suffering. And do you know what that means? Well, when we do something for pleasure, the body produces endorphins, which is a vasodilatory function. But if the person puts duty before pleasure or leisure for a whole lifetime, and they're workaholics, for example, well, okay, maybe they have reached their objective, but what about pleasure? Often pleasure is neglected, and because life should be a combination of pleasure and duty, when duty, therefore, now when we talk about duty, the circulation of the body enters into what we refer to as vasorestriction, constriction. So this alternation is a good exercise for the circulation system, but if we only do a constant vasoconstriction for too much duty, then the body's going to suffer from this, and so the body is going to manifest these effects. Okay, so if you come across a person who is fully covered in legs with capillary veins, ask them. Maybe this is more related to psychosomatics, but if you're familiar with the person, ask them, how many times do you actually take time for pleasure? And they will certainly tell you very little, because these people always put duty before anything else. Especially in older people, you'll find this, who for a whole lifetime have always worked. Oh, I like this picture so much. Well, this picture is a bit ironic. This woman, this fat woman, who is measuring her thigh in the hope that she has lost maybe some kilos. Well, I particularly like this picture because it reminds me of my mother. Now, if she hears me, she'll kill me. But you have to know that my mother has had 5 children. And this picture represents panniculitis. Now I'll explain to you why the link between panniculitis, the liver, and this picture. Now, assuming that an alteration of the liver will alter the function of fat metabolism, and the person is highly predisposed to gain weight, to gain fat, certainly a well-balanced diet will be helpful to keep fit, and certainly exercise will also help. But I assure you that if a person has a swollen liver as a result of severe stress, and well, this type of the person will be covered with fat. It's as if this fat wanted to protect the nervous system. I have tried to put my mother on a diet on several occasions. I told her to do exercise. She did improve a little bit after that, but her nervous system is so susceptible to getting angry. Well, you consider that raising 5 children is really not easy at all. The only thing that may alleviate her this is when I massage her liver Metameric and I work on the corresponding dermalgia, although it is so painful that I can't even torture her. And as a consequence, the dermalgia, well, I can't even work on it. It's just too painful. My massage is very light when I do it, and I usually concentrate on the liver. And when I start working on it, it warms up a lot. There's almost a release of energy and heat. You can feel it. But there's a problem. The nervous system, in the case of my mother, for example, is so sensitive. It is emotional and apprehensive because that's her character. So she also represses anxiety, and even when there's no reason to feel anxious, she will feel anxious. So all this tension in the nervous system, well, certainly with 5 children, it's understandable, even though now we're all grown-ups. But over the years, we've caused so much tension that a person like my mother, therefore, who is currently 57 years old, you're not going to make her lose weight simply by massaging her liver. But should you ever come across with a person who has this problem, this is a warning signal that the liver is not working properly, and so it will be your main target to work on. And in the meanwhile, you'll also work on the gallbladder, Metameric, and in reflexology, you'll also work on the liver and gallbladder. Okay, now we're going to talk about cellulitis, every woman's dream. I'm joking, every woman's nightmare. Even though, on a tangent, I believe that a little bit of cellulitis on a woman, as was shown in those old movies, doesn't hurt. Very skinny women sometimes lose their appeal, but then again, to each his own. These skinny women, at least it's my personal taste. I don't like it. As a man, as a masseur, I like rounder women, perhaps because my mother was fat. So I'm not talking about excessively fat, but a little bit of cellulitis on a leg doesn't hurt. But anyway, now I'm going to explain to you why cellulitis is formed. Well, this is due to an alteration in the gallbladder. So you'll have to work on the Metameric, on the dermalgia, you'll need to work it on the foot, because when the bile, which is contained in the gallbladder, enters into the circulation, as it should, it will dispel fat. It is the most powerful dispeller of fat that the body can synthesize. This is formed especially on the outer thigh, on the gluteus, and now I should be able to give you some maps of the meridians on the body. But anyway, on the side of the leg where cellulitis forms runs the meridian. So a clogging of this energy channel, which is the flow of energy, that's what it is. A clogging, if this clogs up, there will be it will be another source of cellulitis. So you will need to work it directly on the spot. But if you don't work on the meridian, well, even the meridian actually, you need to work the gallbladder metamere and the dermalgia. You're not going to obtain great results. You'll have short-term results, but if you don't remove the root cause of cellulitis, then you will not have such great results. So, what is the difference between panniculitis and cellulitis? Panniculitis affects the entire body. Cellulitis, on the other hand, affects only the main body parts, typically in females, such as the gluteus, the outer thigh, and the inner knee. These are the basic parts. There is no cellulitis on ankles. It may form there. The only thing that can happen to the inner ankle is an accumulation of liquid. And this may lead to grooves on the skin, which may be confused with cellulitis. But in fact, from the ankles down, the only thing that can happen is an accumulation of liquid. Now, you can also touch the leg. If the leg is lukewarm, then it's lymph. If the leg is cold, then you know that it's liquid. The difference depends on whether the water or liquid is contained inside the cell or outside the cell. If it's inside, then it's liquid, retained by the cell. If it's outside the cell, then it's lymph. And as a consequence, it can warm up the leg a little bit. And by touching it, you will feel that it's lukewarm. But in both cases, you can perform lymphatic drainage, which will be the subject matter of the next video course. Everyone thinks that horizontal stretch marks, or vertical stretch marks for that matter, happen when a person has gained too much weight or has gained weight too quickly, or one of these factors. So, in fact, we have nerve endings on the skin which are constantly in communication with the brain. So based on what the brain processes in terms of emotions, and on a tangent, these emotions are transmitted from the body, which the brain reads. So if this information which reaches the brain and which is then sent to the body are conflict, doubt, anxiety, etc., they can alter the skin elasticity in certain parts of the body. Even because, and I personally know some people, but you probably know them, some people like this too. I know many people who have stretch marks and who have never either gained or lost weight, so they've always maintained stable weight. But they've had stressful periods in their life, and that can happen to anyone. And the brain, by living in these stressful moments, has transferred on the body this tension until it created stretch marks. I know that this may not be consistent with your knowledge, but talk to someone, for example, who has had 3 pregnancies. Many of them may have stretch marks, but some of them may not. So, in fact, I even it happened to me to see someone with a belly full of stretch marks, and I explained to them this mechanism that arises in people. And I asked them, but these stretch marks, when you got them the first time, was it did it happen on the first pregnancy when your skin was still not prepared? And they answered, no, you know what, it's pretty bizarre, but in fact it happened on the second or on the third pregnancy, when the skin was already accustomed to being stretched, so it should have been more elastic. But they also told me that with the first and with the second pregnancy, they were very, it had been very pleasant. With the third one, instead, they were very anxious. So, in the case of pregnant women, stretch marks are the result of stress related to the pregnancy. And so, but when we look at men, for example, these stretch marks are always related to a period in their life full of stress that was repressed and not manifested. That's why we need the spleen and pancreas were tense. They communicated to the brain, and the brain, through the nervous system, reflected this tension on the skin and thus gave rise to these stretch marks by altering the elasticity of the skin. So in the case of the spleen and pancreas, we have horizontal stretch marks, and in the case of alteration of the stomach, we have vertical stretch marks. To the delight of many beauty centers, Mother Nature has endowed women with the blemish of infiltration, so that these beauty centers indulge in lymphatic drainage to try to alleviate this this blemish. In fact, in reality, that is, for the poor paying customer, this lymphatic drainage would be almost useless, or in any case, it only has short-term effects unless we alleviate the kidneys. Because if the kidney is having trouble, then it's going to be difficult to get rid of this excess liquid from the legs. So by working on the corresponding metamere, you'll notice that the person will feel the need to go to the toilet more often, just by working on the metamere. Let's, for example, say that you don't work on the metamere, but you work on the dermalgia. You will still get excellent results. Now, to the delight of my family that I'm going around telling them all their private life, I have a younger sister who is a singer. In fact, you can see her on YouTube if you look for Mariana Chacha. Well, she has this problem with liquid retention in the legs. By alleviating the kidney metamere, I always get excellent results. Now, I even put her on a diet and I told her to do some exercise, but the most effective thing on her is the treatment on the kidney metamere. Well, I work on all the other metameres as well, but I work on her legs, I work on the dermalgia, on reflexology, and all the corresponding metameres. The results are always amazing and also last a pretty long time. Obviously, when I'm working with a sister, I tend to neglect her. I always say, okay, I'll do it. When I have time, I'll do it. But then when she comes to my studio, it's rare. But the results, when she comes, are always immediate. So, in summary, every time you come across people, regardless of their sex or age, you will always need to work on the kidneys metamere and on the corresponding dermalgia. Then, if you want to add lymphatic drainage in the legs, you can do that. But the greatest results will come from alleviating their metamere. So you will have to work on the kidneys metamere in the best conditions for working on this Metameric. Sorry if I'm stumbling now, but I've been talking for hours, so you'll allow the kidney to work efficiently and to get rid of that liquid automatically. This is the image we saw before. So we're talking about lymphatic acne. First, before we talked about seborrheic acne. Now, because it's not easy to distinguish between the two unless you're an expert or a dermatologist or a physician, I normally consult Martina, which is another sister of mine, and she's a professional esthetician, and she helps me to distinguish between the two. But when I'm in doubt, I usually work the intestine and the lung Metameric. So I work both Metamerics, so I'm sure that the person will feel better. I always tell them that there may be a worsening of the situation after I treat them. But once I have done this and I've worked on both Metamerics, I know that I've done a good job, and I know that the client or customer is going to be happy. This is a picture that I took this morning on a client. She's, I think, 69 or 70 years old. She's not a young lady anymore, but anyway, this is a woman who has worked all her life. As you can see, above the knee, there is a very large vein that is very visible. Now, to alleviate it, I always work with the palpebral. You can work on it, no problem. You can't cause any problems to that. Now, if you do the palpebral on the vein itself, unless it hurts, because if it hurts, then it means it's inflamed. There can be a folliculitis, but a phlebitis. I'm sorry, but when the person has phlebitis, usually you can't even come near her because it'll be too painful. So once you you're sure that it's not phlebitis, you can work on it. Nothing will happen. Work with the palpebral technique directly on the problem, so as to restore elasticity to the treated part. You can see also below the knee there are also visible veins, but the main message originates from a tension in the small intestine, so in the corresponding Metameric. Now, when you come across these people, you have to work on the small intestine Metameric and dermalgia, not to get rid of this blemish, because you will never get rid of it. And on another tangent, I want to explain to you an important thing that may upset some physicians, but I'll explain it to you and then you can draw your own conclusions. You have to know that the circulation system has preferential lanes, let's say. It's as if it was composed of many highways where the cars have to drive through, and these are the arteries. Now, it's obvious that one of these arteries becomes more visible, even for aesthetical reasons. People would like to remove it, but remember that if you remove that artery or even that set of capillaries, you have removed potential highways that could be used by the traffic or by the cars that are running through. And by removing these highways, you are going to overload the other highways. That's the reason why this person and so many customers I know have told me that once they have been operated on a vein, so once I have removed a vein just for aesthetical reasons, well, their condition has worsened, and all the other veins have worsened because the blood, which was running through that vein, now is running through the other veins, so their other veins are overloaded. Now, the concept is pretty simple. I will never go against a physician's opinion. If a physician says you need to operate on that vein, I'm not the one to say no, but I will tell the customer, however, that if the problem or the vein or the artery is at risk, well, then yes, okay, you need to operate. Nobody says no, but if it's only for aesthetical reasons, well, then I suggest to the customer that before removing that artery, their condition may worsen, and this happens 80% of the times when they pull out an artery, such as the safena, for example, for aesthetical reasons, and automatically another vein next to it will come out and will worsen even more. So always tell them that their condition may get worse, and then you let them draw the final decision or make the final decision. But I think it's right to advise them anyway. Okay, this blemish is due to, you need to work on the small intestine and on the heart metamere and the corresponding dermalgia. And if you want to help this blemish, to improve this blemish, you work also on the spot, in addition to working on the metamere and dermalgia. By massaging the skin, you'll notice, and the underlying tissues, in the palpebral technique, you will soften the underlying tissue, and you will alleviate the pressure, and the veins will settle more easily, and as a consequence will be less visible because they're not pushed to the outside so much. Last blemish in the body is atonia. As you can see from this picture, you can see the tissue, not only the skin, but also the other layers tend to sag. Now, here I'm showing you the underarm, which is typical, but it could also happen in the breast or in the gluteus, on the belly. Many tissues that have this sagging look, so there's lack of muscle tone, and this is called atonia. The culprit of this is the urinary bladder. Please don't confuse a urinary bladder with gallbladder. They're completely different, and they're not even relatives. Jokes apart, you will need to work on the gallbladder, on the bladder metamere. You may improve tone by working on the bladder dermalgia, but what you need to understand from a blemish such as atonia is that the bladder is suffering, and it's in the bladder is suffering, which you need to work on in both situations. And you will also need to work it on reflexology. Especially if the person is young, you will be able to improve this problem a little bit. If the person is already over her 50s, and they're still as young, but the results will not be so easy to achieve, because as we age, these results will be less and less easy to achieve. But anyway, you will certainly be able to improve it a little bit, work on the bladder for atonia problems, and also for other problems that this person may suffer from: cystitis, urethritis, which I explained to you in the last video. They may somatize in the face with dark circles under the eyes, or maybe a person who has accumulated too much fear and too much anxiety, and it is still reflected in their character. So by alleviating the metamere, you will be able to soften and to improve all these problems, okay? All right, now we've talked about body blemishes, and now I'll wait for you at the next video.